of the of the webcast series that's geared towards founders in the DeFi space. So Sam, so why don't we start with I guess how you got into crypto?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess before this, I was at Jane Street Capital trading international ETFs. And I really liked it there. It was a good fit for me, and it was also just a good place, and they're good to me. I sort of, don't really have many complaints about it. And which is sort of a weird place for this to start, because sort of like the natural sort of progression from that was to stay there. And basically up until I left, I was pretty sure that that was what was going to happen. I was sort of not at all planning to leave at any point, a month before I did. And what happened was not some sort of grand falling out or anything like that. I guess I just sort of, sat down and thought hard for like the first time about what am I going to do with my life. And
that was 2017.
Yeah, so this was like fall 2017 or late summer, I guess. And the thing was that I did that I guess was different from when I thought about it before was rather than think about like, what would be something good or pretty good I could do, because Jane Street seemed really good. Like,
Yeah.
that sort of would have led me to
I think
just
so.
think,
I think international ETF is Jane Street's like bread and butter, right? Like Jane Street
yeah,
is known for international ETF market making.
yeah, they are. It was a really cool place. And it's a good place in a good place. And I felt, and I really liked my manager. I mean, it's sort of, so, but okay. So, it was like, I mean, it was really good. But I think the thing that I did was I sort of thought like, okay, sort of starting from the top here, if I want to just decide from first principles, like, what's the best thing for me to be doing? What should that be? And when I sat down and thought about it, sort of what I came away with was like, well, I really want to build my own thing. I really want to start my own company. I like that's something I want to do sometime in my life. And that there are actually also a lot of other things I want to do sometime in my life. And I really like sort of the optionality and flexibility to start doing things, and see how that goes. And that if I was going to do a sort of an now or never thing, like, I'm sort of only getting older.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I left. And I left not sure what I was going to end up doing. And the first thing I did actually was go to the Center for Effective Altruism.
Okay.
It's a nonprofit movement. Looking at what sort of the most effective thing that we can do is to do good with our lives. And anyway, sort of after doing that, I like checked out crypto. And sort of the genesis was like just looking at coin market cap and be like, huh, that's weird. Like this coin on this exchange is not trading at the same price as that coin on that other exchange is. And the prices were too different. Like it wasn't like, oh yeah, there's the 1 BIP. I'm sure that's covered by fees. It was like, no, that's 5%. So that means there's a bug somewhere here. Like it just has a bad data feed. That's sort of what happens. Like you see a 5% arbitrage in finance and you're like, okay, like either it's a bad data feed, that data is super stale, or these aren't even the same product. I mean, it's just like, yeah, they have the same ticker, but like actually these are different coins. And that was true half the time. I mean, the data is garbage, but actually half the time it was real. The arbitrage was there. And it was there and bigger than it was sort of supposed to be. I don't know, bigger than I'd ever seen. And so anyway, I sort of jumped into crypto, and the start of it was just like, oh wow, there are these gigantic arbitrages everywhere. Like, what if you just try and do them? And the answer is, well, you can't, because you don't have an account on both exchanges. And I'm like, all right, I'll create those. And it's like, oh, sorry, your withdrawal limits are $300 a day. Like, you can make $6 a day doing this. You can pay for lunch. And so then you try and you're like, okay, what can I apply to have higher withdrawal? And it's like, yes, the queue is 3 months long. We haven't responded to anyone's support ticket in the last 2 weeks. We're totally swamped. And there's just like it's an enormous line of problems like that. You finally think you've gotten there, and then you do sort of your first wire transfer from your bank account to Coinbase to get it all started, and your bank calls you and they're like, we don't do crypto, your bank account is now closed. Like that's what it is, And so anyway, sort of starting up Alameda was like a 3-month slog in solving like this large number of sort of operational problems to be able to actually do any of the trades that we wanted. But once we'd done that, once we sort of like, put together every single one of those pieces, and you do need all of them. Like an arbitrage where you can do all but one leg is not that good. You end up with all your money sitting in a bank account you can't withdraw from, and like you maybe made 5% once if you're lucky. But once we finally put together enough pieces that we could start doing arbitrages, it came together. And sort of the most fantastical week in some sense I've had was this week, a few weeks really in early January 2018 rather, where we had all the pieces to do arbitrage between American and Japanese exchanges, and Japanese Bitcoins are trading like 5 to 30% higher than American Bitcoins, and you could just sort of do it if you put you had to put a lot of things together here, because you had to not only have U.S. crypto infrastructure but Japanese crypto infrastructure. But if you had that and you had all the bank accounts and stuff like that, you could just do it and you could make 10% a day, and there's $1 billion trading on each side. And so that was sort of this like really crazy few week period. And then the bubble sort of burst, the giant arbitrages went away. But that was sort of like how I got into crypto in the first place.
So what was the, oh, by the way, just a quick note for the audience, if you have any question for Sam, we're gonna leave at least 15 to 20 minutes at the end to get your questions to Sam. But so Sam, so that was the beginning. What would you say your biggest struggle building Alameda Research and FTX has been since 2017, since you started over the last 2-3 years?
There have been a lot of mini struggles. I mean, there's just sort of like every week there's a new mini struggle on, just to give sort of a flavor of what some of these are. I mean, on the Alameda side, there's a lot of things I'm talking about, like, oh God, you have to have a bank account in 4 different countries and none of them like crypto. And we want to do like $15 million a day of wire transfers to crypto exchanges. And it's not subtle. It's like, could we please wire $15 million to Coinbase Inc.? We're not sliding that one past Chase. So there's this long string of things like that on the Alameda side, and on the FTX side, there's a long string of things like, oh God, like we can't get data into this country. It's getting like severely throttled. And we have a lot of users there, and they're all complaining. And like, what do we do? Like everyone is complaining about this part of FTX, but their complaints don't seem to make sense. Like they just logically don't make sense, but everyone is complaining about it. So clearly it's not just like a crazy person. Like clearly they're all right, but they're also, none of them are saying something coherent. What do you do? And the answer sort of ends up being, no one could put their finger on what was frustrating them, but there are a few UX things that were really annoying. And the thing is that if there's annoying UX, it's actually really hard to figure out what's annoying about it. Often you just use a product and you're like, I didn't have fun. That's not a fun, like I'm frustrated. And you don't even know why. Like you're not sure what the thing that frustrated you was exactly. It's just like, that was bad. That's a bad experience. I don't want to do that again. And it's actually this like long, torturous process to walk yourself through every fucking button you clicked. And then be like, oh, that button. Fuck that button. Like I had to click that so many times. I was trying to send 2 orders. Why did I have to click that button 6 times? That's unreasonable. And as soon as you get there, you're like, oh, right, of course, this is an easy fix. You just like move this box over here, and then you turn all those 4 clicks into 1, and then the problem's solved. But it turns out to actually be a little bit tricky to figure out that was the thing that frustrated you.
Yeah.
And so we've gone through these long processes, on FTX, where we have these back and forth with customers, and finally figure out what the thing is that people want. With sort of a classic example being switching sub-accounts. If you have different positions in different sub-accounts, it used to take like 4 clicks to do it, and you have to move your cursor all over the screen, and you're trying to trade in real time. That's a lot. That's really annoying. And so you just like put a box right next to the order entry form where you click on a sub account, switch to it, and it just like really significantly improved the experience there. So,
but no, go ahead.
oh, no, what were you say?
No, I was gonna say like these are, obviously these are not easy problems, but they're very solvable problems. These are
Right.
like day-to-day, like operational and product decisions.
Right.
What are some of the like higher level, like big theme kind of
Yeah.
struggles or challenges that you face?
It's a really good question. And the first thing that I do want to say, though, is that if you look at sort of like all of the kind of aggregate struggle we've had, like 70% of it is just a collection of these things.
Yep.
70% of it is not like, here, like, one cool trick to jumpstart your business. 70% of it is no, there's this very long string of decisions you have to make, like, thousands each day, many of which look like this. And the more you get right, the better. And they're all kind of finicky. And a combination of having the right intuition, doing the right digging, having the right context, and other things like that. So the first thing is actually these things are super important, and there's a ton of them, and a lot of building a good product is just sort of doing getting like as high a fraction as you can of things like this right. But okay, so you put these aside and you say, ignore any problem that sort of isn't in and of itself that big. Like, what are either giant problems or sort of themes of problems or something like that like really haunted us and that were sort of like the sort of things that could have killed it. And there have been a few of those. And sort of the clearest of those and the most brutal of them was that when I started up Alameda 3 years ago now, I sort of thought I had a decent amount of management experience, not a ton, but I'd sort of like managed 6 people in my career, most of them for like a few months, and generally gotten decent feedback at it, pretty good feedback. And so I sort of felt like I get this management thing. I get the basics of it. I'm not saying I'm the world's expert, but like I can do it. And the answer was I could do it when things were good. It's sort of like everything's humming along, and you just sort of do straightforward things. You check in with people, you give suggestions, you give feedback, you ask questions. You say, oh hey, here's an important thing, like consider doing this. Whatever. But that's a very different thing than managing a large group of people when things are bad. And there's this whole set of things you don't learn until either you do them or you have someone who sits you down and says like, here's what happens when things get bad. There are a lot of hard decisions you're going to make, and it really matters what you do, and some of these are not intuitive. And so anyway, sort of
How
at
many
the
people
start,
are there currently in
currently there are, I mean, if you sort of there's a little bit of a definitional issue about exactly exactly how you count it, but like 50 is the ballpark.
Okay. Between Alameda and FTX?
Yeah.
Okay.
At the time there were 30 maybe.
So how so obviously managing 50 people and managing 6 people there's a huge difference.
There's a huge difference.
How do you scale from 6 to 50?
Yeah, it's interesting. And some of it is that a lot of it, we're actually doing kind of the same things. And we're really reaching the point where those stop working. I mean, it's sort of like if we double again, you lose the sort of thing of like, I know everyone personally and like have a sense of what they're like and how to interact with them. Like that's the sort of thing where like I'm at the breaking point of that. Like, I can't do that for 50 more people. I can kind of sustain it here. And the answer is, and you try and do this sort of like, general tree structure where you have managers and they manage people and stuff like that. But the problem is that like to get really exponential growth, you have to like have that branching factor and not be that small and not be that big. It has to be like, a reasonable branching factor. And the problem is if you do that, you're managing someone who's managing something, who's managing someone, who's managing someone. And the fidelity loss at each step is massive. And you look at these companies that have these really core people who are really on board. You go 4 steps deep, people don't have a fucking clue what the company's doing. The company doesn't have a clue what they're doing.
Yep.
The company doesn't care about them. They don't care about the company. There's no loyalty. And it's just a massive clusterfuck at the bottom. And you see this at a lot of large companies in crypto and elsewhere, where you talk to one of the like recent hires, and it's clear that they just don't care how well the company does. They're not trying to make the company do well because they're not incentivized for it, because no one who has the ability to incentivize them for it even knows their name. And like, there's really hard problems of how you kind of keep things like loyalty and company culture consistent across many levels of hierarchy, and it's a really hard problem, and most people just fail at it.
Yep.
We don't have that yet. We have like 3 layers total, roughly, which is not that many. It's enough that you can like mostly keep things tight knit, but boy, are we stretching the limits of that. But yeah, sort of at the beginning, and we grew from like, 2 people to like 30 in a few months when Alameda first started up, which I mean is a lot, but it's also, I mean, that's sort of what happens sometimes with a startup, especially a startup that sort of strikes gold, and Alameda really struck gold at the beginning. And it's like arbitrage in crypto in late 2017 and early 2018 was an amazing business to be in. And then we had a bad month, like February came, and all the gigantic arbitrages went away. So this like giant faucet of money just turned off.
Yep.
And there are these smaller faucets of money, but also our system was not built for them. Our system was built for the giant faucets of money. So it just had leaks everywhere. Like it's sort of like built for like, who cares if you lose like 0.25% a day of your assets to stupid stuff? Like you're making 10 times that. So like the thing to optimize for is not, carefulness. It's like bigness. It's fine that the best thing to do it as big as possible, whatever the costs. And then all of a sudden, like, went from amazing to bad in a month, and like people weren't happy, and I had no idea how to handle that problem. Like I sort of like tried my normal managing things, and they didn't work. Like people stayed unhappy, and people are like, I'm unhappy. I'm like, so here's like a valuable project that I think could really help us in these areas, especially some of the ones you're talking about. Do you want to try that? And they're like, I don't think you understand. I'm unhappy. And it's like, no, I get it. And I think that like we can try and solve that problem of unhappiness if we solve the underlying problem of like, this part of the system isn't doing very well, and here's a project that would help that. And they're like, no, you're really not getting me here, Sam. I'm not happy. And that sort of like, went on for a month, and it was a really brutal month. I mean, that was like, the worst month of any business I've been a part of. And I think that is like by far the biggest sort of problem that I've ran into, and like challenge that I didn't know how to solve, and that it took a lot of grueling conversations for me to kind of get a grasp of some of the things that you can do to resolve something like that.
The saying goes, the only way to resolve internal conflict or unhappiness at a startup is growth. And the opposite is true.
Yeah, I think like there's an extent to which that's true. And like, as soon as we sort of solved it, like as soon as we sort of solved the trading parts of it, that did a ton. It's sort of like the proof is in the pudding there.
Yeah.
And I think that's just true. Like you sort of look at our P&L, it's like, and as soon as it started going up again, like that did a lot. But also a lot of people left because they're unhappy. That was another important part.
Did you face any hard decisions of having to lay people off because you had a couple of bad months and you didn't know where things would go next?
It sort of, and it wasn't quite. It wasn't like we don't have the money to pay for your salary, so we're letting you go type conversation. It was more like, do you still believe in this?
Mm-hmm.
Like some people did and some people didn't, and it's like if you don't, I mean, I didn't know how to handle this at the time, but in retrospect, what it ended up as is like, if you don't believe in this company, this isn't going to go well. Like, this, like no one does well at a company they don't believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And, no one's really good at running, at producing things, and no one's good for morale. And so that was, in the end, like what had to happen was either people had to be convinced that it was an exciting place to be, or that it was not the place for them. And that was sort of the morale side of things. And the technical side of things is whatever. There are like 3 problems we had to fix. We fixed them, and then they're fixed.
Yeah. Would you
So
say that was the hardest period of
yeah,
your?
I mean, it's so much harder than any other period by orders of magnitude.
Yeah.
And it's not that it's working more. Like it was that the work was not exciting. The work was grueling. The work, like every day, I was just like, oh God, why do some people hate me? Like this isn't fun. This is like what am I doing? You know?
Mhm. A good question from Spencer. He's asking, did your faith and morale in the company or crypto waver too during that time? If so, how did
Um,
you recover?
yeah, it's a good question, and the answer is sort of. My faith in the company's ability, morale-wise, to pull through wavered. Like that, I wasn't sure we were going to make it. My faith in the company's ability to make money didn't waver that much. Um, and the reason was, I just like became pretty convinced looking at the numbers that like, you know, it was still a lot of positive numbers except for a few things, and that those things were not that hard to fix.
Mhm,
And then we did it. I mean, it didn't actually take that long. It took like a week.
mhm,
And after that week, trading was good again.
mhm.
And really reliably. So like the actual underlying problems, it really did turn out sort of like, yes, we were fucking some things up. Then you fix those things, and that fixed the problem. Um, and so it's never even all that like, you know, worried in the end about could we still make money if we did a good job. It was more like, are we going to be able to keep the band together?
Yeah. So you only went through one challenging week throughout the entire 3 years.
Well, it's a really challenging month. It was one challenging week trading wise, and then a challenging month and a half morale wise.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. June asks something about something you just mentioned, right? So you mentioned you did your normal managing things, and June wanted to know what those things were.
yeah. So like, what's sort of like the when things is this a question like when things are good and there's no giant shit show to deal with? Like, how do I like what's management like
Yeah,
as a baseline?
I
Yeah.
guess.
So it's, you know, everyone obviously has different, you know, has sort of different approaches to this, and I don't want to say mine's the best. It's what I do. I don't know. It seems like it works for me, okay. But like, yeah, I don't want to make a strong claim that like everyone else should do exactly what I do or anything like that. But
Yeah.
and it's really important to do something that works for you, um, and that you can be authentic at. Although that's something you can teach yourself also. But you know, basically, like sort of my goal is sort of silly in some senses. It's like do good things and not bad things. Like, you know, really cut down on times that I make things worse. Anytime I make things worse, like reflect on that and be like, how can I not do that again? Um, and then anytime that there's something that we don't do as well as we could, think about like what could I have done to make that go better? And it doesn't matter why it didn't go better. Like it's my responsibility for it to go better. And that was one of the core lessons I learned
Yep.
was it doesn't matter if I assigned a project to someone else and then they didn't do it and then that thing went poorly. It's not like I'm absolved of responsibility because I slacked someone else and said, hey, can you take this project on? And they said yes. That's not what it means to like manage something. Like what it means is that it's my responsibility that it goes well.
Yep.
Full stop. And that like one strategy I can employ is like, you know, slack John and be like, hey John, can you do this thing? And sometimes that's not the right strategy because the answer is John is not interested in that thing, doesn't have context on it, wants to be doing something else, isn't good at that thing. And it's just like it was a mistake of me to use the John strategy there. Like John should have been doing this other thing. And like, you know, I need whatever, you know, I need to get Jenny in to do that thing. Like that was the strategy that would have worked. Or sometimes the answer is I need to do it myself. Like that was like realistically speaking the strategy that was going to work there. Sometimes it's like you just don't bother with something. It's like, okay, this is like clearly not working. It's not that important. We're just not going to do this or get this right. And sometimes it's like this needs to be an all hands on deck situation, and I need to call a company meeting and be like, hey guys, this is what matters right now. If you're doing something that's not this, that's a mistake. And if that doesn't do it, like just walk past every person, be like, what are you doing right now? Like, reminder, this one thing is like 70% of all that matters right now. You're not doing that one thing. You know, pitch me why what you're doing makes it, whatever. You know, it's sort of like whatever you need to do to make what happens happen, what needs to happen happen, is sort of what you need to do. And so sort of combining that with like trying not to get in anyone's way unless I really have to.
Actually,
And
sorry, related to that, just a quick question
yeah,
I have. Do you have a clear idea of everyone in your company is doing, like all 50 people currently?
I'm no longer quite there, but I have like a vague idea of what everyone's doing and a clear
Okay.
idea of what like half the people are doing. So it's sort of like, I mean, we are getting to the point where this is really stretching my ability to stay on top of everyone, but I can stay on top of a lot of people and stay on and sort of stay on top of everyone with like one level of removal. But that's, you know, every person we add sort of stretches out a little bit, and that's one of the big constraints on us adding more people is like, do we stretch the management structure thinner or make it deeper such that there's more fidelity loss?
Here's a good question from Eric related to what we just mentioned. Um, you can also read it, Sam, in the chat. So Eric
Yeah,
says, it seems like you have a deep bench and the management issues have been how you hand things off. How do you hire in the first place?
yeah, and so that's also something that I think like my thoughts on have evolved quite a bit. And at the beginning, I had a little bit of a moralistic view on this. And my view was like, here's what I think should matter. I think like how, I mean, you know, how smart you are, how good you are at doing things, and how good a fit you are for the things we need to be done is like what matters. And sort of like that's what matters, you know.
Hire
And so
for
it's sort
strength.
of right. And sort of like, okay, we need a developer. Like, I want the best developer. What's that mean? I don't know. Like, whatever, coding competition, something else. Like, I don't like whatever. There's all these highly correlated tests you can do of how good of a developer someone is.
Yep.
And it's sort of like that's 90% of the answer. Oh, maybe that's 70%. There's other things like, do you have crypto knowledge, which matters. Although less than you think, 'cause if you're a really good developer, you can sort of learn that.
Yep.
Um, and and then there's sort of everything else, which is like the tiebreakers or something like that. And that was wrong. It was sort of like there's a part of me that wants to live in a world where that's the answer, but we don't live in that world. So, you know, that's not how you that's not how you run a successful company, as it turns out.
Yep.
And maybe it is if you're running a 50,000 person company, because at some point your company is so big, you have no idea who someone's going to be interacting with, what they're going to be doing, what their work environment is going to be like. It's just like, yeah, hire a generically good person. I can't do better than that. I have no idea where they're going to end up. I don't even know what city, you know, they're going to be working in. But when you're a startup, you know exactly what the culture is. You know there are only 6 people in the company. It's not like, oh God, who even knows who their friends are going to be at work? No, it's going to be Bob. That's who it's going to be. That's the person who's going to sit next to them and mentor them. And so you actually have a ton more information and you use it. And it sort of like feels silly in some ways, but like one criteria, especially when we're really small, is like, do you work well with me personally? Like, do you happen to have a communication style which is similar to mine? And if it's very, very different and you don't like flexing over to the way I communicate, that sucks. It means you're probably not going to have a good time at the company.
Yep.
And it feels, you know, I sort of feel bad doing that. I feel like I'm sort of imposing quirks of my personality on our hiring decisions, which feels like sort of morally wrong to me. But you know, that it is what it is. Like, it's, you don't, in the end, the universe doesn't reward you for sticking to your moral principles and hiring people who are going to be miserable at work. No one's happy if you do that. And so all these other things about like, do they like the people they're going to sit next to? Do they like their managers? Do they like the communication and working style that your company uses? You know, do they like the sort of like product development style that your company uses turn out to be really fucking important? And like, 2 things there. One is like, yeah, personality. Do you get along with the personality that people are going to be working with? That really matters. And another thing, I'll give sort of an example for developers, is we now think that there's something which is like plausibly more important than raw coding talent for working at a lot of the positions that we have for a developer. And that thing is, do you like the way in which coding works here? And in particular, like the development cycle. The development cycle in crypto is fast, and at FTX is faster. You know, we sort of like, you see us ship products pretty quickly.
Testing prod.
Right, and maybe you don't quite test in prod, but you cut out everything you can. It's like, you know, it's like everyone else has this like 3 weeks of testing. And we're like, no, you can actually cut it down to a pretty fast process if you don't dick around in there. And it's like, and you really bound what I can do. You know, you sort of like, right, you get as close to that as you can. And there are trade-offs, you know, and one of the trade-offs is some of our code is not beautiful. Some of it's ugly. You know, sometimes there's just the hack there, which is like, and like some customer complains about something, and you end up like, and account ID equals blah blah blah, then something else to satisfy some customer. And right, and like your program, you're like, that's the last thing you could do, right? Like that's so bad at scaling. And we're like, I hear you. I know why you think that's so bad. On the other hand, this customer is 7% of our entire product's volume. And they're going to stop trading if we don't change this thing for their account. But most of our customers don't want that change. And they're the only one who wants it. And yes, we could develop out a whole classification system for our customers based around this one customer's request. We don't even know what future customers are going to want. We don't know how to classify them. We don't know what the axes are. We don't know where this needs to stick in. We could build out this entire infrastructure. It probably wouldn't even be the right infrastructure. Or we could run this one line of code, which special cases their account. And the answer is, and this is, I'm not saying this is how a company should work, but you have to decide how it works. And what we've decided is, yes, in some cases we will have that special casing.
Yeah.
And it's ugly, but it's what gets the product to do what we want it to do. And you know, yes, there's debt there, and we have to pay it back sometime later, and that's an active trade-off. But what that means, if you follow it through, is that there are a lot of devs who will see that line of code and they'll never be happy at the company. You know, it's just like there's not. It sort of doesn't matter what else you do. It doesn't matter how much you pay. If that's what some of the code looks like, they're going to go to work each day and be frustrated and unhappy, and look at that and be like, I don't want to code in this code base. And yeah, that's fine. Like they're not wrong in a global sense. They have preferences. We have a coding style. They don't match up, and that dev should work at a company that works in the way that they like working. And I think that's sort of another example of hiring practices that, like, you know, my thoughts on have sort of changed over time from like this sort of ideal world, like, no, you do the decision that creates the best outcome, whatever that means.
Here's a, by the way, I love how you describe the if account equals. I think part of that is, I mean, part of the product development cycle is part of the culture. So it's really like a matter of culture fit. Here's a high-level question from Brian. What's your decision-making framework for making those key decisions, deciding between trade-offs? It's a very abstract question, but curious if you have any thoughts.
Yeah. So, you know, how in general do I handle things where there are sort of these weird trade-offs between non-like things that are hard to run on the same scale? And as you know, different people have different sort of trade-offs there. I am not very dogmatic about them. That's sort of like, if you had to put me on a scale, I'm on the non-dogmatic side, which is to say, like, my sort of default is you're faced with a situation, you take out a pen and paper and you calculate it. And you're like, let me estimate the costs and benefits of this decision in terms of, you know, ultimate adoption, right? And you're like, well, I think that it'll cost us this many dev hours, which I price at this. I think that it'll sort of like get us this much, many more customers, this much more volume, which I price at this. This is how the trade-off looks to me, which number is bigger. And you're going to screw up a lot of those. Like, it's hard to do it perfectly, but you can do the best you can. And sometimes that gets you a lot. That's sort of the end of the spectrum that I'm on. And obviously you don't do that with everything. Sometimes you're like, okay, I faced this type of question 17 times in the last month. Like, clearly I shouldn't calculate it every time. Like, clearly at some point, I should just like do sort of a global calculation and be like, okay, here's the default. The default is we handle questions like this in this way, because that seems to be generally the answer. And only when it's really important are we going to bother recalculating. But that's sort of like the high level answer.
Gotcha. Let's talk a little bit about the future, because you're working on quite a few big things, and I'm sure the audience is very excited to hear from you about these things. So tell us about your near future plans.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of things going on, and maybe that's another sort of company philosophy, is having a bunch of things going on. There's sort of this sense of whenever there doesn't feel like there's like slightly too many things going on, we just do a new thing.
Yeah.
It's like that's a sign that we have excess capacity that we could be spending, and there's a ton to spend it on, but that's a sign that there's nothing we feel compelled to spend it on right now, which means that we should find something. But what are sort of the biggest things that we have in the pipeline? One sort of thing is obviously there's day-to-day stuff. I'm sort of going to ignore that. FTX US is something which like I think is a great product, and I think we sort of like have not put in a big BD push. Like it's just sort of sitting there, you know, a cool product in case anyone wanted to use it. And this is the sort of like US you know, crypto exchange, and it's a bit later than we were expecting to make a big push there, but we are finally doing that. We hired, we made sort of one of our first big FTX US specific hires recently, where we hired Sina, who is the previous head of crypto at Robinhood.
Wow. Oh
Which
yeah, I saw the news this morning.
Yeah, which we're really excited about, because I think that's gonna. I mean, he sort of asked like, you know, what would be the right person to build out FTX US? I mean, that sort of like honestly would have been like my answer, is like, do what Robinhood did. Who knows how to do that? How about the head of crypto at Robinhood? That seems like a good guess. So okay, you know, so
by the way, Robinhood is such an amazing product. It's so incredible.
oh, I mean, it's gotten so far. It's so outperformed what I would have thought it would have done.
Yeah. What are other projects?
Yeah. So putting that aside, and another thing I'll say there is that like, I mean, for you know, I've talked with him a lot, and in addition to like liking his resume, you know, he's sort of like I'm really excited for him. I think he's like really gonna have a lot of energy and knowledge to just like drive it. But on top of that, we also have some really cool stuff coming out over the next you know, next few weeks, which is gonna kind of come together to really help jumpstart that. Hopefully, I mean, we'll see what happens, but it's you know, I think it could be pretty big. So there's sort of that, it's been in the works for a while, and it's sort of finally coming to fruition. Putting that aside for a second, you know, a lot of what's coming out right now is Serum, and that's sort of what I've been spending a lot of, you know, my time on recently, and I think it's super cool. And what it is, for people who don't know, is it's I mean, it's a decentralized product, and you know, it's sort of like a full decentralized ecosystem, fully on chain. If you had to say like, what are the guiding principles of it, it's like be fully on chain, fully decentralized, and outside of that, build the best product you can, and the most important product you can. We sort of were like, okay, from first principles, what is that? And there's all this stuff that is like central to crypto and doesn't exist in DeFi. And I mean, Ethereum network congestion is like one of the core reasons that you can't have a matching engine. And
I'm
okay,
curious.
yeah.
So for Serum, like this is super like specific question, but
Yeah,
are the order book updates done on chain or off chain?
yeah, everything's
Okay.
on chain. It's not like there's no L2, and it's not like there's sort of some centralized matching engine that then publishes the results on chain.
So if a trader updates their order, how much
Yep.
would it cost in terms of on-chain cost, on-chain transaction?
That's a really
cost?
good question. And like the context here is you use a centralized exchange, and it's obviously it's free to place an order.
Yep.
You use an Ethereum-based DEX, and it's, I mean, who knows, somewhere between 15 cents and $15, depending on how congested the network is. And that's a lot. I mean, it cuts out like 80% of volume. Like you sort of can't send an order of size less than like $10,000 without having, you know, without paying like multiple basis points just in gas. And you send an order of $100, it's ridiculous. You're paying 5% in gas. And you can't provide liquidity. You can't like place a provide that might not get filled because you're paying money for it, even if it doesn't get filled. In Serum, which is built on Solana, you know, sending an order costs, you know, roughly like 1/100th to 1,000th of a penny.
Okay.
And so it's like 5 orders of magnitude cheaper. And that's a huge difference. It sort of goes from prohibitive to a rounding error. And that's one of the exciting things. Like, yeah, you can send limit orders. It's fine. You're paying $0.00001 to send that bid. You know, that's not that's not going to break the bank.
But the high frequency market maker, like
Yep.
100th of a penny might still be too big for high frequency market makers.
It
right?
might be. And to be clear, there's some volume this isn't going to be great for. And you look at an HFT trading with another HFT, and the fact that it takes a second to settle a trade and costs 100th of a penny, in gas fees might be too much. Like, there is volume that basically can't live on chain.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sort of like mentally just bracketing out half of the world's volume just has to be in a centralized venue. But I think you are left with a really healthy chunk of it that can.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a really healthy chunk doesn't care about a second to settle and 100th of a penny in gas costs. And another thing is, like, you look at order to fill ratios, and they're not that, even for sort of HFT firms, they're not that high. You know, I think that, like, most firms are well under 100 there in terms of that ratio. And so now, you know, you're talking about per fill, you're paying like 1/10 of a penny or something like that. And that's sort of okay. I mean, if your fills are $100 each in size, which is pretty small for a fill, and you're paying 1/10 of a penny on that aggregate for all the orders you sent that led to that in gas, you know, that's still that's 1/10 of a bip extra cost. On the crypto scale, that sort of doesn't really matter.
So on that note, Spencer asks, what was the evaluation that led to you picking Solana as the underlying blockchain, given how many layer 1 chains are out there? And what gave you the conviction in Solana to give up Ethereum's network ecosystem? I guess you already answered the question in terms of fees, but there's also a question in terms of latency, right?
Yeah. So and there's actually 3 things here, which is something I honestly didn't realize.
Until you made the decision.
Yeah. Or which is that there's fees, there's latency, and latency is not that different between fast chains. You have all these chains that say they're fast, and they all have a latency which is like half a second. And why is that? Well, one step of any consensus protocol is sending light around the world a couple times.
Yep.
Like, one thing, you have to get consensus between geographically distributed players, and that's a few hundred milliseconds.
Yep.
And so there's nothing you can do about that. So you have the latency of all these networks that say they're fast, and they're about the same. It's, you know, they're not all the same, but that's sort of not where the big difference is. The big difference is throughput. In addition to cost, it's how many orders per second can the network handle, and that's different from the latency because you can do multiple in parallel. And so Solana, you know, the block time is 400 milliseconds, although that's probably going to go down at some point to be a bit faster, but it can handle like 100,000 orders per second. And the reason is there's sort of many at once.
You said 100 per second?
100,000.
100,000, yeah.
Yeah, transactions per second, which is, to be clear, and so now you get into why Solana. Well, there's all these sort of newer chains which are faster than Ethereum, which are 50 to 1,000 times faster. And, you know, they're handling something like 1,000 transactions per second. Then you have Solana, which is another factor of 100 faster than them. And that's huge. I mean, that's the difference between like being able to support a single order book for the entire chain and being able to support an ecosystem of order books and still have a chain left over to do other stuff with.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of why Solana. There's a lot of other things too. We really like the team, and that was a core piece of it. But really just like, yeah, it's 100 times faster than you know, even other fast chains are. And then what gave us the conviction? I mean, first of all, if Serum fails, my best guess as to why is this. It's that, like, yeah, it was really hard to get people over from Ethereum, and it failed.
Yep.
So, you know, I'm not sure it will work, but I've become increasingly optimistic that it will. And the reason is just an enormous kind of coordinated project. Like, we just have like 30 companies at once looking into migrating, or at least adding support for it, and that's going to do a lot. it's going to mean that you go from no wallets in the ecosystem to 10 within a month. It's going to mean that, a lot of big name projects list on Serum and on Solana. It's going to mean that a lot of liquidity providers are providing there. And you put all of those together, and all of a sudden, the ecosystem starts to come together sort of out of nothing, enough to jumpstart it. And that's sort of the core hope, is that the value proposition combined with, the amount of ecosystem we can jumpstart together is enough to get customers to try it out.
I'm guessing, well, for me, the biggest network effect on Ethereum is all the tokens on top of it, right?
Yeah.
If you build a DEX and you don't have any shitcoins to trade, then
that's right.
DEX is useless.
What's the point? Right.
Yeah. So how do you bridge those ERC20s to Solana or to Serum?
So the best way is you go to the project and you're like, hey, would you like your native token to be an SPL token? We've actually had some luck with that. Like, there are going to be projects just listing natively on Solana.
Okay.
Who are sort of like enticed by their sort of native matching engine being 10,000 times cheaper and faster and more liquid. So that's the best answer. The second best answer is on-chain cross-chain bridges. There are a lot that are building out now. You look at Thorchain, Ren, BTC, things like that, Suma. There's also some theoretical things which are super awesome, basically versions of optimistic rollouts, which we're going to be building over the coming months, which can create like kind of very good on-chain bridges to be able to just interface with one chain from another. And then sort of short-term thing of how do you jumpstart this all, and you just create a centralized wrapper of an ERC20 token as an SPL. That's clearly not the long-term answer in DeFi, but it's a thing that can like create a product that people can use. And there's sort of this progression from the shittiest version to the best version over time.
The analogy is like wrapping Bitcoin on Ethereum.
Exactly, like WBTC.
Yeah, exactly.
It's it's not the most decentralized thing in DeFi, but also there's like hundreds of millions of dollars of it out right now.
But you gain the benefit of programmability on Ethereum, even if you lose the censorship resistance and self-custody, all that stuff.
That's right, and Solana is totally programmable in the same way that Ethereum is. So you don't even have this problem of like you can't program on the Bitcoin blockchain. Yeah. So like, getting Bitcoin to other places is a huge pain. Moving between Ethereum and Solana is way nicer because they both have smart contracts.
Yeah. Cool. Very nice. We have 5 minutes left. I don't know if anybody else has any question for Sam.
I'll answer. I see Eric's there quickly. Will you build self-custody on Serum? The answer is yeah, absolutely. That's Serum is fully on chain, and it's similar to like MetaMask and using an ETH-based DEX. Like, your funds are in your wallet, you have the key to it, and all the GUI that's built does is like writes an instruction that then asks permission from your wallet to send it, and you have to sign it with your wallet. So it really is fully on chain, and it's fully in your custody except for the second during which it's being sent as an order and matched.
Actually, here's another thing about Ethereum is that everyone has MetaMask.
Right. Oh,
so
yeah.
You have to overcome this problem.
Yeah, big problem. So first of all, we're building SPL token wallets, which is Solana standard. Also, we're working with as many wallet providers as we can to get them to support it. So you see like Math Wallet, Coin98, and others, which are sort of like just general wallets, are starting to build out support for SPL tokens because of anticipated demand from Serum. And there are a bunch of Serum-specific wallets like Soulflare and Solid, which are building out, and some other cool ones in the pipeline. So that's sort of like part of the answer. But part of the answer is, yeah, it sucks. Everyone has MetaMask, and MetaMask doesn't have SPL support. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not super enthusiastic, or I'm not super optimistic about MetaMask adding Solana support. I'd love it if they did. I don't think they will. So part of the answer is that we need to tell people, here's the website you go to download a Solana wallet. Part of the answer also is like, once we have optimistic rollups, you will be able to use MetaMask to trade on Serum. It will be actually fully cross-chain, fully interoperable. We're a few months away, and you still have to pay $1 and wait 5 minutes because you're still sending an ERC20 transaction at the start of that. So it doesn't cut out that part, but there's that. And then there's going to be a lot of centralized places that'll provide bridges as well. I mean, FTX obviously will, but Binance, BitMax, and others list Solana, and so if you buy Solana on them, you can then send that to Serum and use it. So, we're building out as many bridges as we can, as much wallet support as we can. But it is the case that right now MetaMask itself will not do much good unless you have some SPL native wallet somewhere.
Couple more questions. Milan asks, I loved FTX Battle Royale. What are your thoughts on demand for copy mirror trading in crypto? Bringing it to Serum?
Yeah, I think there's really demand. I'd love to bring it in there. I don't know exactly how it'll work. If someone wants to build it, that'd be awesome. Like, I would love someone to build a copy trading plugin for Serum. That'd be sick. And if not, I don't know, maybe I'll find someone to do it sometime in the next year. But it's not going to happen immediately absent someone else doing it. It's not like one of the core things that needs to get up and running for the product to work. But yeah, I don't know, Milan, if you want to build that, that'd be awesome.
Spencer asks, do you see a future where traditional financial institutions become regular users of DeFi or Serum? What is infra development regulations, et cetera, that are needed for that future to come true?
Yeah, I do. I think that could happen. I think that'd be really, really valuable and really huge. And a lot of what we're doing with Serum is geared towards making that possible. And a lot of that is like, all right, what does that mean? They're going to want to see speed and efficiency and an API. They're going to want it to look like easy to interface with. And so what do we have? We have an order book, which is what people are used to. It's reasonably fast. It's cheap. And there's an API-like interface for it, and sort of everything we can do to make support for it feel natural is, I think, going to go a long way towards it and creating institutional level liquidity. And obviously, it's not going to shock anyone to know that Alameda Research is planning to provide liquidity on Serum, but it's not going to be the only one. We're trying to do everything we can to get sort of an overwhelming show of force in terms of support and liquidity for Serum to create as hospitable an environment as we can. There are other things when you look at like regulation. Yeah, that's a big thing, and that's going to be a large, messy, long problem. And I don't claim to like have the magic bullet for that. And each place is going to sort of have their own sense of what their place in the regulatory infrastructure is.
I want to go back to one of the earlier questions as the last question for you, Sam. Is FTX still hiring?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're always hiring. We need 5 times as many people as we have, and also don't have the capacity for it. So I don't know. I mean, yes is the answer. Maybe sort of a slightly longer answer is like, we really go for quality over quantity. The FTX team, it's way bigger than I'm used to, but way smaller than other exchanges with comparable volume. And so, it's like really, we want people who are going to be great, who are going to be really excited to work on it and build it out, and good fits for it, and able to kind of drive themselves to accomplish a lot. And if that's you, I think we'd love to hear from you. And one thing I'll say is like, and one thing I was wrong about is like, the extent to which there are a lot of things that are super important that aren't like sort of the like, like how good were you at coding competitions or something like that, like, like how how driven you are to make this as good a product as it can be, how much you care about that, how flexible you are, how good you are at learning new things, and at seeing like, man, here's a problem, let me try and troubleshoot things to make it better. Here's something that'd be awesome, let me do what needs to be done to make that happen. How good you're at managing people, how good you are to work with, like those things are super important, and put together are just a lot of what matters. And so yeah, if you're like be super enthusiastic about it and good at getting things done, I reach out to us, and it's like contact@ftx.com. I think there's a job specific email. I've forgotten what it is, but whatever contact works too.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. Had a really good conversation. Hope everybody else enjoyed it. We're going to put this on our website sometime next week. Hopefully everybody else in the crypto community can enjoy it and learn from Sam. Imran, do you want to take it over here?
All good. We can end here. Thanks
Awesome.
so much, everyone.
Awesome.
everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Thank you, Sam. Take care.
Sam.
See ya.